The last box hit the porch with a groan that might have been mine. Welcome home, Eleanor. Welcome back to suburban Ohio, the town so quiet you could hear your own hair grow. I stood there, sweating in the humid August air, looking at the U-Haul that now held nothing but my regrets and a few stray packing peanuts. This was it. My grand escape from a failed relationship and a laptop screen that stared back at me with the blank, judgmental face of a snow-covered field. I, Eleanor Vance, so-called queen of paperback horror, was officially out of ideas and back in my childhood bedroom. The house looked smaller. The same pale yellow siding, the same slightly crooked porch swing. But now it was my problem, my sanctuary and my prison. A place to heal a broken heart, or at least find a new and interesting way to procrastinate on my deadline. I kicked a stray box labeled kitchen shit closer to the door. The contents rattled ominously. Probably the blender I never used, and the set of knives my ex gave me. The irony was not lost on me. My internal pity party was interrupted by a crisp, authoritative cough. I turned. Standing on the edge of the adjacent lawn, a patch of grass so perfectly manicured it looked like a CGI rendering, was a man. He was wearing a police uniform that looked like it had been ironed with a laser level. His jaw was square, his hair was short and severe, and his eyes were currently scanning the disaster zone that was my front yard with a look of profound disapproval. "Ma'am," he said, the word came out clipped, precise, "you're aware that Municipal Code 34B-7 requires all refuse containers to be placed curbside no earlier than 6 p.m. the evening before Collection Day." I blinked, looking from his stern face to my mountain of cardboard boxes. Are you citing my moving boxes?" He gestured with a rigid thumb toward the single, empty, pristine recycling bin standing sentinel by his own garage. "Collection is Thursday. Today is Tuesday. Those boxes constitute a violation." Right, of course. This was my new neighbor. I could already tell we were going to be great friends. "Look, officer," I squinted at his name tag, "Riley. I just drove 10 hours. My soul has left my body and is currently hitchhiking back to a city with decent coffee. Can you cut me some slack?" "The rules are in place to maintain neighborhood order and aesthetic," he replied, his face an unmoving mask of civic duty. He was like a human-shaped instruction manual. A slow smile spread across my face. Oh, this was perfect. A target. Aesthetic? Buddy, my entire life is a violation of aesthetics right now. These boxes are just the opening act. I gave him my most charming, least sane grin. I'm Eleanor, the new public nuisance. His eyes narrowed slightly. A crack in the facade. "Officer Riley, and I would appreciate it if you'd take your project indoors." "I'll get right on that, Officer Order," I chirped, turning my back on him with a dismissive wave. As I wrestled with a particularly heavy box of books, my gaze drifted across the street. And froze. The Henderson House. It stood there exactly as I remembered it, only more so. More dilapidated, more hungry. The paint was peeling like sunburnt skin, the porch sagged in the middle like a tired old man, and the windows on the second floor were dark, vacant eyes staring out at nothing. A shiver, cold and unwelcome, traced its way down my spine, despite the heat. It was an old feeling, a familiar dread I'd packed away 22 years ago. I could almost see it again, the memory I'd polished into a safe, logical story. Just a troubled kid acting out. That's what I'd told myself. That's what everyone had said. A rebellious teenager, a weirdo who liked to climb things, slipping out of his window in the dead of night. Nothing more. My writer's brain had just embellished the details over the years. The long, spindly limbs, the way it moved, less like a boy and more like an insect. I shook my head, forcing the image away. "Get a grip, Vance," I muttered to the box in my arms. "You're a horror writer, not one of your characters." "Don't you mind him, dear." The new voice was soft and crackly, like old paper. I turned to see a woman with a cloud of white hair and a bright floral apron smiling at me from over the fence on the other side. She held a small watering can, tending to a row of impossibly vibrant rose bushes. "He's a good boy, our Jack, just—" "Very particular," she said, her eyes twinkling. "I'm Martha Gable, been living here 52 years. "Eleanor Vance," I said, relieved by the sudden dose of normalcy. "Lived here for 18, then ran away for 12. Now I'm back." "Oh, I remember your parents. Lovely people. So sad when they sold." She pointed her watering can toward Officer Riley, who was now meticulously wiping down his already spotless patrol car. "That one's a catch if you can get past all the rules. Single, keeps to himself, mows his lawn every Saturday at 9 a.m. on the dot." She was a walking, talking neighborhood watch bulletin, a Google search in a floral apron. "Good to know," I said with a laugh. "Thanks for the welcome, Mrs. Gable." "Call me Martha, dear," she smiled, then her gaze followed mine to the house across the street. Her smile faded just a little. "A shame about that old place. Hasn't been right since the Hendersons left in such a hurry." She leaned in conspiratorially. "Never did say a proper goodbye." Later that night, the house was a maze of half-unpacked boxes and ghosts of furniture past. I'd set up my laptop on the dusty dining room table, surrounded by the evidence of my collapsed life. The blank document stared at me. Page 1. The cursor blinked, and blinked, and blinked. Nothing. The well was dry. My brain was a desert. Defeated, I pushed back from the table and went to the kitchen for a glass of water that tasted faintly of old pipes. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Back in the city, there was always a siren, a distant argument, the hum of traffic. Here, nothing. Just the cricket symphony outside and the frantic beat of my own anxious heart. That's when I heard it. A sound so faint I thought I'd imagined it. Scrape. It came from outside, from across the street. I stopped breathing, straining my ears. It was a dry, dragging sound, like fingernails on old, splintered wood. "Raccoons," I whispered into the empty kitchen. "Definitely raccoons. Big ones, with a meth problem." I went back to the dining room, turned on my music, let some indie rock band with feelings fill the oppressive silence. I tried to type, to force the words out. The shadow fell across the... No, her blood ran cold as the door... Cliché. God, I was a hack. I rubbed my eyes, tired and frustrated. And in that moment, as the song ended and a new one was about to begin, I saw it. In the reflection on my dark laptop screen, over my shoulder, through the window behind me. Just for a second, at the very edge of my vision. A flicker of movement. A shadow detaching itself from the other shadows in the yard. It was tall. Too tall. And it was gone before I could properly register it. I spun around in my chair, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Nothing. Just my unkempt backyard, the overgrown bushes, and the splintery gray fence separating my property from Officer Riley's perfect green square of order. My breath came out in a shaky laugh. "Jesus, Eleanor." I ran a hand through my messy hair. "You're losing it." It was the stress, the move, the 2-day diet of gas station coffee and beef jerky. My imagination, always my greatest asset and my worst enemy, was just kicking into overdrive. That's all it was. It had to be. The raccoons, it turned out, were disciplined. They had a schedule. Every night, just as the house settled into its deepest silence around 2 a.m., the scraping would start. It wasn't the frantic, scrabbling sound of an animal. This was slow, methodical. Scrape. A long pause, just long enough for me to think it was over. Scrape. Like someone dragging a single long fingernail down a wooden board. Over and over. It was coming from the Henderson house. I knew it. I'd lie in my bed, my childhood bed, and stare at the ceiling, tracking the sound in my head. I'd try to reason with it. Termites, the house settling, a loose shutter I couldn't see. But none of those things sounded so deliberate, so patient. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Then came the dream. I was 8 years old again, kneeling on my bed, my breath fogging up the cool glass of the window. Across the way, the light was on in the upstairs bedroom of the Henderson house. I saw the silhouette first, and then the window slid open. But in the dream, my brain didn't supply the safe, clean memory of a rebellious teenage boy. No, the thing that came out of the window was all wrong. Its limbs were too long, bending at angles that joints weren't supposed to bend. It didn't climb down, it unfolded. It moved down the wall like a drop of oil on water, sticking to the surface in a way that defied gravity. Its face was just a smudge, a dark oval of nothing, but I could feel it looking. Not at me, just looking, out into the night. I woke up with my own scream stuck in my throat, the sheets twisted around my legs like ropes. My heart was a frantic drummer in the quiet room. My t-shirt was soaked with cold sweat. I sat there for a long time, listening to the crickets, trying to push the image of those long, unjointed limbs out of my head. It was just a dream, an anxiety dream, fueled by stress and a diet consisting of 70% caffeine. That's all. The next morning, I was outside with a mug of lukewarm coffee, staring at the Henderson house like I could burn it down with my eyes. The coffee wasn't helping the dark circles that had taken up permanent residence under my eyes. I probably looked like a raccoon myself. "You look like you haven't slept." I jumped, sloshing coffee onto my hand. Of course, it was Officer Jack Riley, standing on his perfect lawn, dressed in civilian clothes, a crisp gray t-shirt and shorts that looked like they'd been ironed. Even his morning jog attire was infuriatingly neat. "Astute observation, officer," I grumbled, wiping my hand on my pajama pants. "You must have graduated top of your class at the Academy of Stating the Obvious." He ignored my sarcasm, his gaze following mine to the house across the street. "Something over there keeping you up?" His tone wasn't curious. It was the tone of a man cataloging evidence. The weird new neighbor is obsessed with the creepy old house. Check. "Just brainstorming," I lied. "It's what writer folk do. We stare at things until a story falls out of our heads. It's a glamorous process." "Right," he said, and the single word was packed with so much doubt it could have sunk a battleship. "Just try to keep the brainstorming to regular hours. Some of us have to get up in the morning." He gave a curt nod and jogged away, his posture perfect. Fucking asshole. His disbelief just made me feel more isolated, more like I was the one coming apart at the seams. Later that week, determined to actually get some writing done, I decided to hunt for my old manuscripts. Maybe my teenage angst could spark something. The search led me to the attic, a place of dust bunnies and forgotten treasures. After half an hour of sneezing, I found a cardboard box marked Ellie's stuff. Inside, beneath a stack of faded report cards and a troll doll with faded pink hair, was a folder of old drawings. And there it was, drawn in thick, childish strokes of crayon. My house on one side of the page, the Henderson house on the other. And coming out of the second-floor window was a stick figure, except its arms and legs were 3 times longer than its body, all spidery and bent. It was crawling down the wall. Underneath, in wobbly 8-year-old letters, I had written, "The Monster Next Door." My breath caught in my chest. I had no memory of drawing this. None. I'd spent 22 years telling myself it was a boy, a troubled kid. But this drawing, this was what my dream had shown me. This was the raw, unfiltered memory before I'd had a chance to wrap it in a safe, logical story. My hand started shaking. I crumpled the drawing into a tight ball, my knuckles white. I threw it back in the box and slammed the lid shut, as if I could bury the memory again. But the image was burned onto the back of my eyelids. The storm rolled in on a Tuesday night. It was a proper Ohio thunderstorm, the kind that rattled the windows and made the lights flicker. I was at my laptop, trying to force words onto a blank page, when a flash of lightning illuminated the Henderson house. And in that brief, brilliant flash, I saw it. In the top left window, a pinprick of light. I froze, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. It was gone as quickly as it came. My mind immediately started its spin cycle. A reflection, a trick of the light. Then it happened again. A flicker, the distinct shaky circle of a cheap flashlight. On, off, on, off. Then nothing. Holy shit, someone was in there. Squatters, teenagers looking for a thrill. Whatever it was real, tangible, not a ghost or some monster from a childhood nightmare. A wave of relief washed over me, so potent it made me dizzy. It was just a person with a flashlight, and they were breaking the law. Despite every fiber of my being screaming at me not to, despite the fact that it would mean having to talk to him again, I picked up my phone and dialed 911. Officer Jack Riley was one of the 2 cops who responded. Of course he was. I watched from my porch as he and his partner, flashlight sweeping, moved toward the Henderson house. They found the back door unlocked. It had been for years, and went inside. The rain was coming down in sheets now, and I stood there getting soaked, hugging myself, watching the beams of their lights dance from window to window. Kitchen, living room, up the stairs. They were in there for what felt like an eternity. 10 minutes, 20. Finally, the front door opened and Jack emerged, his partner behind him. He walked across the wet street, his boots splashing in the puddles. His expression was unreadable in the dim porch light. "House is clear," he said, his voice flat. "What? No, I saw a light, a flashlight, in the upstairs window." "We swept the entire place, Vance, top to bottom. There's no one in there. No signs of entry, besides the back door we used. No footprints in the dust except for ours. Nothing." My mouth went dry. "But I saw it. I know I did." He just looked at me. The annoyance he usually wore like a second skin was gone. In its place was something worse, a kind of quiet, professional concern. The look you give someone you think is unstable. "Eleanor," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "It's late. The storm is playing tricks on the eyes. Maybe you should try and get some rest." He thought I was crazy. He thought I was hallucinating. And the worst part, the absolute goddamn worst part, was that as I stood there on my porch, rain dripping from my hair, staring at the dark, empty windows of the house across the street, a small, terrified part of me was starting to believe he was right. He was right. I knew he was. Of course he was. I was a stressed-out, sleep-deprived writer living on stale coffee and childhood ghosts. Seeing lights was the logical next step on the road to a full-blown meltdown. But knowing you're losing your mind and actually stopping it are 2 very different things. The next few days were a blur of low-grade panic. I started checking the locks. Not once, like a normal person, but 3, 4 times before I could even think about sitting down. I'd walk past the front door, and my hand would just reach out, a separate entity, to jiggle the knob. Locked. Good. 5 minutes later, I'd be back, my heart thumping a dull, stupid rhythm, just to be sure. Writing was impossible. Every time I sat at my desk, my eyes would drift, drawn by some invisible magnet to the window, to that window, the empty, black square in the Henderson house. It felt like an eye, unblinking. I started drawing the curtains, even during the day, but that was worse. Then I was just sitting in a self-imposed tomb, acutely aware of what was on the other side of the fabric. I stopped sleeping altogether. I'd lie in bed, rigid, listening for the scrape, for the sound of a window sliding open, for anything. The house was full of noises I'd never noticed before. The groan of pipes, the whisper of the wind under the eaves. Each one was a potential footstep. Each one made the breath catch in my throat. Then, on Friday morning, I saw it. I was making coffee, the sun finally breaking through the gray Ohio sky. I walked over to my bedroom window to pull back the curtains, to let some damn light in, to try and act like a functioning human being. My hand was on the cord when my gaze snagged on something outside, on the gray wood siding of my own house, right next to the window frame. 3 marks, parallel, about a foot long, and deep. They weren't scratches from a branch. They weren't from a squirrel trying to get a grip. They were gouges, dug into the wood, splintering the edges. They were too high off the ground for any animal I could think of, short of a bear on a ladder. They looked like they'd been made by fingers. Long, sharp fingers, dragged down with immense pressure. The air left my lungs in a silent rush. My coffee mug slipped. I didn't even register the sound of it shattering on the floor, or the hot liquid splashing against my shins. I just stood there, staring. The fear I'd been wrestling with, the fear I'd tried to rationalize and dismiss as a product of my own broken brain, was now carved into the side of my house. It had been here. It had been right outside my window, while I was sleeping, or trying to. It had touched my house. My legs finally remembered how to work. I didn't even think. I ran out the front door, down the porch steps, and onto Jack Riley's perfectly manicured lawn, not stopping until I was hammering on his front door with the flat of my hand. I was in pajama pants and a t-shirt, barefoot, with coffee dripping down my leg. I didn't care. He opened the door, a towel around his neck, looking fresh from a run. The look of annoyance on his face lasted for about half a second before it was replaced by something else as he took in my state. "Vance, what the hell?" "You need to see this," I choked out, grabbing his arm and pulling. "Now!" To his credit, he didn't argue. He just followed me, his cop senses obviously kicking in. I led him around the side of my house and pointed, my own hand shaking so badly I could barely keep it steady. "There." He stopped. He looked at the marks. Then he looked at the ground beneath them. Then back at the marks. The easy confidence he always carried himself with just evaporated. He was silent for a long time. He walked closer, crouching to examine the gouges, his fingers tracing the air just above them, not quite touching. He pulled out his phone and took several pictures from different angles. He straightened up, his face all business. All the sarcasm and neighborly friction between us was gone. This was a cop looking at something that didn't fit. "I can't explain this," he said, his voice low. He looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see a guy who thought I was a messy, unstable weirdo. I saw a guy who was just as unsettled as I was. "I'm going to install a security camera, one of my own. I'll aim it right at the front of that house. If anything so much as breathes over there, we'll get it." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I wasn't alone with it. That afternoon, while Jack was on a stepladder on his porch, fiddling with wires and mounting a small black camera under his eaves, I saw Mrs. Gable out in her garden. She was wearing a big sun hat and methodically snipping at her rose bushes, the picture of suburban tranquility. I needed that. I needed 5 minutes of normal. I needed to talk about something other than scratches and shadows and things that crawl in the night. I walked over to the low wooden fence that separated our yards, leaning on it. I tried to arrange my face into a smile. It felt stiff, like a mask. "Your roses are looking beautiful this year, Mrs. Gable," I said. My voice sounded thin. She looked up, her own smile warm and genuine beneath the brim of her hat. "Oh, thank you, dear. They just need a little love, and a firm hand with the dead bits." She snipped a withered brown bloom from its stem with a satisfying thwack. We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the only sounds the snipping of her shears and Jack muttering a curse at a stubborn wire across the street. I was trying so hard to hold on to the normalcy of it, the simple peace of a sunny afternoon. But the fear was a physical thing, a cold lump in my stomach. I heard myself speak, the words tumbling out before I could stop them, a desperate attempt to turn the horror into an anecdote, a funny story. "You know," I started, with a laugh that sounded more like a cough, "I think this town is finally getting to me. I'm feeling a little jumpy. Must be the Henderson place. It gives me the creeps." I paused. "Do you remember their son, the wild one, the one I saw climbing down the wall the night he ran away?" Mrs. Gable didn't look up. Her attention was focused on a cluster of aphids on a rose leaf. She carefully pruned the leaf away, her movements precise and unhurried. She chuckled, a soft, pleasant sound. "Oh, Eleanor, dear," she said, her voice laced with the gentle amusement one uses for a child with an overactive imagination. She finally straightened up, turning to look at me, her eyes kind and clear. She brushed a stray piece of dirt from her gardening glove. "The Hendersons never had a son. They only had the one daughter, the poor thing, born with legs that never worked a day in her life." The snip of her shears cutting through another stem was the loudest sound in the world. A daughter, paralyzed from birth. My smile felt like it was cracking on my face. The world tilted, the bright afternoon sun suddenly feeling cold and distant. I could hear Jack calling my name from his porch, but his voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look at Mrs. Gable's sweet, smiling face. My head turned, a slow, creaking motion that felt like it was tearing muscles in my neck. My eyes moved past the green lawns, past the quiet street, and came to rest on that house, on that dark, empty, second-floor window. The story I had told myself for 22 years, the neat, logical explanation that had kept the real memory locked away in a dark box, had just been vaporized by a few simple, casually spoken words. If it wasn't the Henderson boy, then what the hell did I see crawling down that wall?